Hey guys, it's Marco here. We're kind of starting like a segment that we want to do is kind of like a first reaction or just initial reactions to whatever media that maybe one of us has never gone around to watch or, whatever kind of first reaction sort of thing like that. So what I recently watched during this whole quarantine situation was a show that had a little bit of life. It's called The IT Crowd. It's a for people uninitiated. It's a British comedy show. It's sort of Office esque sort of thing. So it follows the kind of shenanigans of the IT department of a big conglomerate company and kind of the goofiness that happens with what they deal with. Like one of the running jokes of the show is like, when somebody calls the IT department, the first thing they say is like, "Hello, IT department. Did you try turning it off, turning it back on again?" Sort of thing like that. So, it has some of the cast they have is Chris O'Dowd. He's been in a few things. I think he was. I think on Stars he was. I think it's a Stars show or Cinemax or something like that, where I think they did Get Shorty. I think is that is the show, but he's been in a few other things. I think he was also in like one of the Thor movies, I think, as well. But it's a very fun show, and the humor is very, as I said, it's not so office like The Office, where it's more like awkward, cringy humor. Like there is some stuff like that, but there's very much like setups that almost like a Seinfeld-esque, where there's like a thing that they'll kind of mention early in the episode and then it'll come into play later in the episode. It has little funny like cutaway gags, sort of like a Scrubs or something like that, where like JD will have a side thought of something like that. And a lot of the characters are very endearing, and and as I said before, it's a very British show. I don't watch a lot of, well, I'll take that back. I do watch a lot of like, there was a phase at some point in time where I used to watch a lot of like, like the British gangster movies. So like a Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch or, I think Rock and Rolla was another one, like a lot of Guy Ritchie stuff. And it's kind of fun to watch those kind of movies, or that's whether it's movies or TV or stuff like that, just to kind of hear, them talk and like kind of use their slang and stuff like that, or like their way of speaking. Cause it's like, you do understand what they're saying. Like they're speaking English, but you're also like, what does that mean? Like they say some random thing and you just go like, what does that mean? Or that's kind of kooky or whatever the situation is. But with this show, I think it's very well written, very the characters are very likable. They have the other character who's Maurice Moss, who is played by, I'll have it. You think I would have done research for this, but no, this is just kind of off the cuff sort of thing. So it has, as I mentioned, Chris O'Dowd, Richard Ayoade, I believe is his name, who plays as Maurice Moss. He's very much like a Dwight, sort of this kind of awkward, like almost kind of robotic sort of character. Like he's very much ones and zeros. Like, he kind of understands human emotion, but he's also kind of like very socially awkward as well. But some of the other side characters are actually pretty funny as well. Like they have a character who's I think maybe he was on British Baking, the Great British Bake Off or whatever the case. But there's a character who's like he's a goth. And they kind of make fun of the fact that he's a goth. Like they kind of treat him like it's almost sort of like a racist thing, but it's also like they just make fun of him for the fact that he's a goth and he listens to like Cradle of Filth and stuff like that, which is actually pretty. And they just kind of keep him in a closet somewhere in the basement. So he's almost like a vampire, like little goofy things like that. And even some of the character, and it's also kind of fun too, because there's characters where they'll put them in makeup, or they'll do like some weird gimmick and it's stuff like that. So it's almost kind of like sketch comedy in some ways, because there's like certain story like cold opens that kind of don't connect to anything else in the show, and sometimes they do. Um, and considering that the show, I think the show started in 2006, so right now I've watched maybe the first season of it, and it is kind of crude, because obviously with any show, like, they need to find their footing. But like in the second season, it's definitely found its footing. I definitely enjoy it. I think it did eventually become from what I remember, I think they were trying to bring it over to American audiences. I think because I think they had, because I think they also brought over Richard Ayoade to be the same character he was on the show, but I think they also cast who did they cast? They cast Joel McHale was supposed to be on the show, and a few other people, but I think it just never took off, which, as I said, that's kind of the same idea with The Office, that they're just gonna rebrand it and do all that. But I'm glad that it didn't go about it like that. But the show is very fun, and I also kind of forget how I guess with a lot of British TV and stuff like that, like, they'll curse and stuff like that. They'll say fuck and shit and stuff like that. And it's also kind of weird because the show also has like a laugh track, and like, at first when I was watching it, I kind of don't like shows that have a laugh track, really, because it kind of doesn't seem genuine, like a Friends or one of those kind of shows. But actually, after a while, the laugh track doesn't become as intrusive. And hell, even I'm laughing at stuff like where the laugh track doesn't pick up on, or when it doesn't play. But I would say for the most part, it's definitely, and if you guys have not seen it, it's pretty entertaining, I think, especially if you're quarantined, less like everybody else. Give it a watch. It's on Netflix. I think it's only 4 seasons, and I think each episode is like maybe 40 minutes or so, something like that. I don't know how British TV breaks off their chunks or stuff like that, but I think it's very kooky, and it's very, as I said, it's a very British-y show. So if you can get past that, I would say, yeah, you would definitely enjoy this thing. But yeah, I would say if you give it a watch, it was pretty entertaining. I know Locke probably has some stuff as well later on down the line, but as I said, it's just a series that we kind of recommend, that we're just trying to see where it goes. If you guys like it, we'll do more. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just shit can it. But for the time being, I would say give it, watch IT Crowd whenever you can, or you have the time. If you're indoors, you have the time to watch it. So yeah, tune in next time, and we'll give you more recommendations of what we're watching. Later.